We're in the middle of chapter 41, or just starting chapter 41. A very, very powerful chapter. And this whole section, Supercharged Love and Awe, is giving us profound tools and meditations to learn how to generate tremendous love for the Ein Sof, and as well tremendous awe for the Ein Sof, because as it says in the Zohar, if you want your activities, if you want your Jewish practices to elevate, to be up in the higher spiritual worlds and to create light, they need both wings. They need the wing of love and the wing of awe or reverence, and just one or the other will not elevate the mitzvahs. And as we said many times, that's actually the point of all the meditation systems we've been learning in this class, is although it certainly makes a person more spiritual, and no doubt you'll have the kind of spiritual experiences many meditators enjoy, the point is not to raise my level of consciousness, although that happens. The point is not for me to have a spiritual experience, although that happens as well. The point is actually to serve the world and to serve the Ein Sof and to elevate the things that I'm doing in the world that are repairing the world, to create more and more light. So for that, you need to generate both love and reverence or awe. And this first chapter of this section, there's 9 chapters with beautiful meditations for both love and awe. This first chapter presents a starting point that may surprise some people. So we had, if you look at the past 2 classes, we had some lovely conversations that although we live in North America, which is very influenced by Christianity, and the side of love has a lot of advertising, and it feels good to have love flowing. Of course, love is all you need, etc., etc. In Kabbalah, that's an incomplete picture. That's a bird with one wing. And in fact, we not only need awe or reverence to elevate anything we do as we're learning how, but also, the Alter Rebbe says in this chapter, of the two, love and awe, does it matter which one I start with? Absolutely yes. Because although love is incredibly important, and we love expressing love, that we want to be masters of love, and the whole approach of Hasidus is to lean more on the side of love than the side of reverence, awe is in fact foundational. Awe is foundational. And that means if I don't have just a starting point, if I don't have my toe on the rock of awe so I can push off from it, then all the love that I generate will actually be lacking something. And we gave an example of if I were to come home one night with a bouquet of roses in my hand for my wife, because I'm such a romantic guy and I love her so much, I want to express that love genuinely. I thought about her enough to go on my lunch break and pick out exactly the flowers she likes. There's just one problem. I came home 3 hours late for dinner without mentioning anything or calling, right? And so what I asked the class is, do those roses feel like they're an expression of love? If I'm coming home 3 hours late, do those roses, does that land? Is that really love flowing properly? Or is that just, you know what, I feel good being romantic, I feel good loving my wife, so I got those roses, but if I couldn't make enough space for her to call and say, honey, I'm sorry, I got delayed, or etc., now the love doesn't flow either. And it's the same with our relationship with the Ein Sof, and we'll see in many ways in this chapter that in order to have that full flow of love, we need to first get that baseline of reverence. And we had a meditation that we've been going through where we sit and we say in the morning, I want to impress upon myself that the root and the beginning, the core of divine service is actually awe and reverence. And I just fill my mind with the concept that the Ein Sof is actually filling everything, surrounding everything, and yet the Ein Sof is paying attention to me and wants me to do what it would like, and wants me to, in fact, accept what we call Malchut, the rulership of the Ein Sof. And then I impress in my mind that the Ein Sof is aware of everything in my mind, in my heart, in my guts, every motivation, and is literally standing over me, watching everything I'm doing. And if you're like me, that fills you with maybe not trembling awe, but a baseline of respect where I say, I got to be careful what I say, what I do, what I think. And from there, now the love flows in a completely different way. And I think you'll find the same thing. So with that as an introduction, let's jump back in where we are. And like I said, any questions, If you're one of the people with us on, we got 6 watching on Facebook. Hello. Please add your comments here, and I will address them as we learn. So we're on page 604 at the bottom. ובעטיפת ציצית יכוון כמו שכתוב בזוהר, להמשיך עליו מלכותו יתברך.
And while putting on the tzitzit, one should bear in mind what is written in the Zohar, namely, that he should draw upon himself his blessed kingdom.
So we went through this meditation. The first meditation was a general meditation on the greatness of the Ein Sof, and that the Ein Sof is paying attention to me directly, and that should fill me with a certain amount of reverence. Then there's a second piece, which is the actual mitzvot that I'm doing. Those are the embodiment of Ratzon Elyon. That's Keter of Atzilus. If you know the Kabbalah, that's a world well above what we can encounter meditating. That's just is beyond our consciousness. And we're actually holding that right here. When I do a mitzvah, when I put a coin in a tzedakah box, I'm actually handling that absolutely most transcendent aspect of the Sfirot. So that's a second piece, that the mitzvot themselves should cause us awe. And then the third piece is the details of each mitzvah can also lead to additional awe. In this case, the tzitzit, I'm having my son's bar mitzvah in less than a month, and we're going to put a talit over his shoulders, and he'll say the blessing. And if I do that, before I do that, if I focus in my mind that is actually taking the Malchut of Ein Sof, the Shekhinah itself, and putting it over my son, now suddenly I'm filled with additional awe. That's the detail of what the tzitzit are. There, you're taking Malchut of Atzilus and you're putting it right over yourself. So 3 stages. 1 is the general meditation. 2 is that the mitzvot themselves fill us with additional awe. And 3 is now the details of each mitzvah that I'm doing can even fill that awe even more. And that really shows you a general principle of Jewish meditation, which is that it's all in the details. It's all in the details. I know in Eastern meditation, I've done enough in my life to speak a little about it. We tend to clear the mind, and if a thought occurs to you, you want to just let it go and empty the mind and stay there. That's because you're meditating on the side of Chokhmah in the East with an empty mind. Jewish meditation, almost without exception, is meditating on the side of Bina, which is the actual intellectual cogitation. That's my ability to have any intellectual crystallization, flow, categorization, and analysis, whatever it is. So in Jewish meditation, you want more and more details to fill the mind, like wine filling a cup until it fills it to the brim, and you hold all those details and look in deeper and deeper. And by doing that, you reach, as the Kabbalists describe, not just Chokhmah, but the source of Chokhmah, higher. So that's a tzitzit. We're drawing malchut on myself. Asher hi malchut kol olamim v'chelu liyachada alenu al yedei mitzvah zo.
Which is the kingdom over all worlds. Nevertheless, we should intend and endeavor to focus God's kingdom specifically over ourselves through this mitzvah, for the commandment of tzitzit is particularly effective in enhancing one's acceptance of the yoke of heaven.
So this is a tool. When you come to temple and you put your tallis on, that can just be, this is what I wear for temple. I'm Jewish. I say the blessing. I put it on. Great. That's wonderful. But to take 30 seconds or 2 minutes to sit and picture as well as you can in your mind that the Ein Sof really rules everything, creates everything moment to moment, fills all worlds, surrounds all worlds. And now with those tzitzit, I'm putting that malchut right over me. I'm accepting it. Now suddenly I'm not just a Jew sitting at Temple Israel for a service. Now I'm sitting in front of the king. The king is watching me, and I'm in a place where I have what the Alter Rebbe described, the prerequisite reverence for now my love to be a really, really powerful wing, and now both will elevate my prayers and my mitzvahs. V'hu kinyan som tasim alecha melech.
This is similar to the commandment, you shall surely set a king over yourself.
And as we said, in Judaism, there's no such thing as a dictator. In Judaism, a king has to be accepted by the people. And that's an incredible dynamic, as we discussed, that even in the time of the temple in Israel, when there were kings, the people had to accept the king. It wasn't imposed. And the same thing, Havdil, with the infinite, not a human king, but the infinite, that again, even though the infinite has created everything, is ruling over everything, the infinite is ignoring the higher worlds and these lofty angels and beings to come and look right down at me and say, no, I want you, Smolash, I want you, with your tzitzit, to accept my will, my ratzon. And that's that baseline awe. And I assure you, if you sit for a few minutes a day and focus on this, or if you focus on it each time you put on a talis, that will be a very different experience of doing that mitzvah. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to say that although there's some people for whom, they're very spiritual people, and they sit for 5 minutes and consider the greatness of the Ein Sof and how that's compacted right into these mitzvahs that I can handle, that fills them with awe, and they're right there. There's some people that maybe they get the idea, but they're not really feeling a deep sense of reverence. They're not changed in their heart. It's just an idea in their mind, and they know in their mind, yeah, that makes sense. I kind of get that sense of awe in my mind. My mind understands, but it's not like my heart's not like, it's not like I'm on a roller coaster, right? I'm not like, ah! I'm not there staring at the Grand Canyon and overwhelmed with the sense of a grandeur of it all, so that I'm gone. I'm just not that sensitive a person. So for those people, if you're one of those, like often I am when it comes to this, if I'm having a busy day, I'll put myself in that category. He says, even if it's just in your mind and not palpable in your heart as a powerful emotion, that as well serves perfectly fine as the wing to elevate the mitzvahs and as the baseline reverence to allow love to flow in its fullest capacity. ואזי אף אם בכל זאת לא תיפול עליו אימה ופחד בהתגלות ליבו.
In such a case, that is, having contemplated this matter, that even though after all this meditation, no dread or fear descends upon him in a manifest manner in his heart.
So say that's the case, and now this is where I've done the meditation. So this is not, well, I didn't bother today, or I didn't bother this week, and why aren't I feeling fear? If I haven't done the meditation, that's why I'm not feeling fear. We're meant to spend time to fill our mind according to the long, short path we've learned, and fill our mind with these ideas and these divine concepts to generate the emotions. So if I haven't done that, the Alter Rebbe says, well, I gave you the tool, go do it. But if I have done it, I've spent the amount of time I expect would get me there. And yet, my heart's not going along for the ride. מכל מקום מאחר שמקבל עליו מלכות שמיים, וממשיך עליו יראתו יתברך בהתגלות מחשבתו ורצונו שבמוחו.
Nevertheless, since he accepts the kingdom of heaven upon himself and draws upon himself the fear of him in his conscious thought and rational volition.
So even if my heart has not gone along and is not beating with awe and reverence, because I drew it on myself in my conscious thought and in the will that's in my mind, so to speak, what I intellectually want to do and what I intellectually feel is the correct feeling. וקבלה זו היא אמיתית, בלי שום ספק שהרי היא טבע נפשות כל ישראל שלא למרוד במלך הקדוש יתברך.
And this submission to God and his fear of him is beyond doubt a sincere one, for it is the nature of all Jewish souls not to rebel against the blessed Holy King.
So it brings up two ideas. And by the way, this is not what's the term? Yirat ha'onesh. Yirat ha'onesh is fear of punishment. So he's not saying, notice his language, he's never said, excuse me, fear of punishment. He's describing fear of the Ein Sof. He's describing fear of sin. And it's like, if I have respect for my wife, I'm not going to come home 3 hours late without telling her. Not because I'm afraid she's going to yell at me or I'm afraid she's going to take it out on me. That's not what it's about. That's not a healthy marriage, if that's the case. I don't come home 3 hours late because I respect my wife. And how would I do that? I mean, she's so important to me, and she's such an amazing person. Excuse me. Why would I ever do that? Not because I fear punishment. And it's the same dynamic exactly with this awe that we're trying to generate, which is that once we recognize the greatness of the Ein Sof, I'm not fearing that my soul is going to be receive some kind of a negative, another 5 hours in Gehenna, or that something negative will happen, God forbid. Nothing to do with that. And as we'll see, if that's the kind of awe I'm working with, that's not awe at all. That's just nefesh b'amit. That's just my egotistical drive coming back in. So I want to be clear as we go forward that this awe and reverence we're talking about has nothing to do with whether I'll be punished or not. That's just my ego. It has everything to do with my relationship with the Ein Sof, my recognition of the greatness of the Ein Sof, that it's infinite, and that fills me with an awe of not wanting to rebel against the Ein Sof, and an awe of sin as opposed to an awe of punishment. And it may sound like I'm splitting hairs, but you'll see when you look at it from the lens of the animal soul and the divine soul, it's not splitting hairs at all. Because fear of punishment, that's the animal soul, and awe and fear of sin, that's the divine soul. And here, even though perhaps after I've done my meditation, and I've sat and I've filled my mind with this divine concept, my heart's not beating. I know that deep inside, because we're complicated creatures, and there's conscious and there's subconscious, and there's even below that. And at my core, I know that I have this awe and reverence of God, no matter what conscious pattern I've covered it up with, perhaps. So even if it's just right now in my mind that I sense the awe and not in my heart, that's just the superficial layer of my heart. I know if I went deeper, inside there's a core that does have that awe all the time. So it's genuine, even if it doesn't feel genuine to my conscious, emotional body. That's a lot. Any questions on that? Any thoughts on that? And while we're pausing, let's, after Eleanor, Sharon, if you can read, and then Paula, and then Joyce, do you want to read with us? Just let me know when we get to you. Just go ahead. 606. הרי התורה שלומד או המצווה שעושה מחמת קבלה זו ומחמת המשכת היראה שבמוחו נקראות בשם עבודה שלמה.
Is it me?
Sue Ellen, you're unmuting?
I just read.
Oh, okay, yeah. Eleanor, please.
Okay, then the Torah he studies, or the commandment he performs, because of his submission to the heavenly yoke, and because of the fear that he has drawn into his mind, are termed complete service, of the kind that can result only from a fear of God, as the Alter Rebbe soon goes on to say.
And this for the Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe, this idea of avodah shlema, of complete service, of being a servant, as we'll go into, was so key. That was what they were working on themselves. And the idea of avodah, that's the whole process, not only of praying to God with total sincerity, but it's also this process of working on myself so my ego becomes more and more refined and out of the way, so that I become more transparent. And I become a different vessel where the different light can flow through me. So this idea of, is it complete service or not, that was everything to the Chassidim. If they came to the Alter Rebbe's town, and they became a Chassid of the Alter Rebbe, and they sat and they worked themselves for a year, and then they came for Yechidus, for a private audience with the Alter Rebbe, and he gave them some work to do, and they went and they worked on it for 6 months or a year, and then suddenly they realized, I didn't get it right. My ego got in the way, and it was about me, and it wasn't complete service. That would just break their heart. There's nothing that was more heartbreaking to one of these Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe than that what they were doing for God and for the community and for Jews was not genuine, sincere, but somehow it was still about them, and their ego was still feeding it and driving the thing. That would just know that these two words here they land very heavily for anyone in that community. ככל עבודת העבד לאדונו ומלכו.
Like all service performed by a servant for his master or king, which is of course prompted by fear and awe.
And we don't have the concept of a demon anymore. In biblical times and in much of history, there was people were servants and people actually were even slaves. So the Jewish concept of an eved is not a slave; it's more like an indentured, full-time servant. But the idea that someone, they got up, and from the moment they woke up, their time was not their own. They had a master, and they had to do what they were instructed, and did they like it or not was not an issue. They just had to do it all the time. There was no days off, and morning to night, all day, it was about making sure that you serve your master, and you put your own pleasure and will completely to the side, and it's not about you. That's the power of this posture of being an eved. And that it's only awe that gets you there. Love doesn't get you there. Because as we'll learn, love, that's the posture of being a child. A child does something for their parents because they love their parents. A servant does something for their master because it's about the master. Nothing to do with if they want to, if they love them, if they enjoy. They're out of the way. They're gone. And here's the kicker. I'll give you a spoiler alert. This is the next page, and this is some of those powerful words the Alter Rebbe writes in the Tanya. If you're interested in holiness, Kedusha, if you're interested in holiness, it's not the service of love and the service of a son or a child that gets holiness anywhere involved in your life and consciousness. Because what is holiness? Holiness is when there's no me. Holiness is when there's no ego. Holiness is when that's gone. And in love, there's always the me that's loving. We enjoy loving. A child does something for their parents, and they're filled with pleasure and love. It's, I'm always there. No matter how powerful the love is, there's always the me that loves. What is the dynamic of reverence or awe? That's where I'm gone. That's where I stand in front of a mountain, and for a moment, there's no Michael Smolash. It's just the mountain. I'm overawed, and I have this moment of majesty, and I'm so small, I'm gone. Or when someone else is so important to me, and I have so much respect for them, and they're so much greater than me, that when I'm in front of them, all I care about is what do they need, what do they want, and I'm gone. I take myself out of the picture. And when I'm gone, that's the starting point when holiness can come, dwell over me, or be within me. Because as long as there's an ego, there's something in the way, and that's not Kedusha, that's not holiness. Holiness is when you're Kadosh, you're separated from the created world, you're separated from any of these dualities, and you're separated from that ego that's in the way. And it's only then, when I'm transparent to the infinite, when I'm gone, that's when holiness can begin. So to me, that's the spiritual core of this whole conversation about the foundational nature of love, is that without awe, now Kedusha can't come, and now, even if I have tremendous love, it's love that's not built on Kedusha. It's love that still has a little bit of me in it. Whereas the ego can be erased if I start with a foundation of awe, and now when the love flows, it's built on a foundation of holiness, and it can be a love that's filled with holiness. So we'll get to that on the next page. On the other hand, מה שאין כן אם לומד ומקיים המצווה באהבה לבדה, כדי לדבקה בו על ידי תורתו ומצוותו, אינה נקראת בשם עבודת העבד. Paula, are we, if you want to unmute for me, please. Thanks.
Okay. Where is the Torah? Am I in that one or on the other hand? On the other.
Where is the Torah? That's right. You got it.
Okay. Whereas the Torah has declared, you shall serve the Avadim, the Lord your God. This verb is cognate with the noun eved, servant, and thus signifies service motivated by the fear and awe of God. And it is likewise written, him shall you serve to avodu.
Right, so that now we're getting into this dichotomy of when I have awe flowing and I have that wing of reverence, that makes me like a servant. And when I have the wing of love energized, that makes me like a child. And actually, ultimately, I want both of them to elevate my Torah mitzvahs. Chmo shekatuv b'Zohar, here we go. Parshat Bahar, Kehai Torah deyahavin ale, o bekadmeta begin le'apaka mine tav la'almachulu. Achei neme itzterich levar, nash lekabbalah ale, o machut shamayim bekadmeta chulu, v'hai la ishtechach gabe, la shaya bekdusha chulu. Joyce, you want to pick that up, or should we go back to Susan? Yeah, Susan, why don't you go ahead, Susan? Take from top of 607.
Is explained in the Zohar, Parashah Behar, just like the ox on which one first places a yoke in order to make it useful to the world, so too must a human being first of all submit to the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, and only then engage in divine service. And if this submission is not found in him, holiness cannot rest within him.
Right, so that's we have a quote from the Zohar that we should see ourselves like an ox. That if an ox is going to be useful from a human perspective, you got to get it used to an oak. As even as a child, as a young ox, it's got to be comfortable with that yoke, because then it can pull and it can plow. It can create food and sustenance for a whole community. And we should see ourselves as the same way. That the first thing we want to do is just say, "I'm going to get me out of the way. I'm going to start with a place of awe and reverence so that my ego is gone. And then I can start moving it. And my love will be from a different place. My love will be filled with holiness," as he says. And even more powerful, if that submission isn't found in me, if I just went with love, if I didn't start with that reverence, if I'm like that husband that came home 3 hours late with the flowers, right? Then that holiness is not going to dwell on me. The Kedusha comes from my identity being gone. The definition of Kedusha, as we said, like when we learned about how mitzvahs were totally transparent to God, it's because they're just purely, all they are is Ratzon Elyon. All they are is will of Atzilus. And so they can be like a chariot for the Ein Sof, whereas we can never do that. And we described how when I did a mitzvah, I have a moment of being like a chariot, like Abraham and Sarah. The opposite is true too. As long as my ego is there, now there's no holiness. Now it's just me expressing my love for God. And that might be a good thing. But if as a seeker I want to experience, not even experience, but I want to channel holiness in my love, now I need to start with that reverence we discussed. I need to, in that relationship mashal, I need to call my wife and say, "Sorry, honey, I'm going to be late. Can you please put the food aside? I really apologize." And when it comes to the Ein Sof, I want to start with a baseline of reverence with this meditation we've learned. And if not, no matter how much love flows, it's missing that baseline where holiness can rest within the love. So if you want your love to contain holiness, start with this baseline of awe, and then you've got both sides. Does that make sense? Let me check if there's any comments on Facebook. We got another 7 people on Facebook. I'm sure more to come later, so welcome. Please, any questions, add them in. And this, I know we have this class is for the Jewish community, but I know from the comments and people that contact me, there's people outside Judaism that also sometimes jump in and benefit from this class, so welcome to you guys. And for my friends in the Christian community, this really, I'd love to share this with everybody, because sometimes we talk about this idea of love and awe, and how, this isn't a class about that, but in Christianity, God is defined as love, and it's all about love. This gets to it so perfectly to me that the Jewish approach has to contain both. It has to contain both. Because the only way to get myself out of the way is by generating awe. Yeah, no matter how much love I generate, there's always a me who's loving, and so there's always an ego in the way. And now I'm myself, I have my boundary around me, and that's not Kedusha, that's not holiness. That's love, but it's not holiness. For me to create love on holiness, let's go a little deeper, right? Usually when the Alter Rebbe quotes something from the Zohar, he doesn't say where it's from. He doesn't actually give us the parsha. And here you see, he said, this is a very rare moment. He says, as explained in the Zohar, in Parshat Behar. Parshat Behar. So he's told us this is in Behar, that's when we were on Mount Sinai, or Moshe was on Mount Sinai. And so why, we know the Alter Rebbe is very specific with his words, why to include here Parshat Behar, whereas most of the time when he says from the Zohar, it's from the Zohar. The idea is there's a midrash about why it was that the Torah was given on Mount Sinai. I'm sure many are familiar. Why did God pick Mount Sinai of all the mountains to be the Torah that God, someone help me out? What was the reason? I know a few people know this. Yeah? Noreen?
Because it wasn't the highest mountain?
Ah, right. It was the smallest mountain. Right. So, there's aspect of humility or reverence or getting myself out of the way that God wanted involved. God didn't go to the highest mountain and say, this is the peak of history. I'm coming into the world for the only time until the end of history. This is a climax of the entire creation. So I'm going to have the highest possible mountain and I'm going to double its height so that you see that this is a miraculous moment. No, God said, you know what? I'm going to pick a little mountain because this is not about your ego. This is not about feeling like I'm up on the mountaintop. This is about I'm out of the way. So the rabbis asked the question, well, if that's the case, why do you bother picking a mountain, right? If you want lowliness, why not give the Torah in a valley? If that's the point, well, why are you on a mountain to begin with? Go to the side of the Dead Sea. We think it's the lowest point on land on the earth, and isn't that a better place to give something if the point is humility and lowliness and reverence and getting yourself out of the way? And that's exactly the point the Alter Rebbe is making. It's not that awe is the only thing. God forbid. You want to be full of love and love God, and in fact, you want to have pride that you're doing the right thing, and that if someone tells why are you going and helping that person? What's in it for you? Aren't you embarrassed to be talking to someone like that, or sitting down and having a meal with this person? Why are you doing it? You should have the pride to say, no, I'm Jewish. This is the right thing, and I'm going to do it. I don't care what people say or think. Whatever it is, I'm going to go ahead and do it. You want to be a mountain, but you want to be a mountain built on humility. You want to be a mountain of reverence and of awe. So that's what Mount Sinai was. It wasn't a valley. It was still a mountain, which meant it had love and it had pride, of this wisdom that we have. And a mountain is a symbol of love. So it was a mountain of love, but it was a mountain of love built on awe and reverence. So that's why all that is contained in just that Parshat Behar. The Alter Rebbe is giving us a little hint that that's the whole dynamic here. We're going to be working on our wing of love, and we'll have many beautiful meditations to learn about the levels of love and how to generate them. But first, we have to make sure it's a mountain built on reverence, and that's Mount Sinai. So yeah, for anyone outside the Jewish community, this to me is such a big piece of what we can teach each other, that in Judaism, love has to be built on reverence and awe. That's why Jerusalem is called Yerushalayim, which means complete awe. Right? The capital of the physical, Jewish nation, Yerushalayim, is not named complete love, it's named complete awe. It's that central to our service of God. V'raya mehemna sham daf kuf yud aleph amud bet shekol adam tzarich liyot bishtei bechinot umadregot. Go ahead, Linda. Can you unmute for me, please?
Where, namely, the category of a servant who serves his master out of fear, the category of a son who serves his father out of love.
Yeah, and just before this, every person must belong to two categories and levels. Right? So this is another source, and this is a new idea that's being brought in. And the two categories are that of a servant and that of a child. He's going to say a son, but a child. Daughter, son, doesn't matter. So when I am expressing primarily awe or reverence, that's a servant. And that's not about me. That's simply about what the Ein Sof needs for me to serve the world around me, for me to serve the Ein Sof. And it gets me out of the way because I'm not there. It's not about what I want. It's about I get up in the morning and I say to myself, what does the Ein Sof need from me? What does God need from me? Let me do that. Doesn't matter if I'm tired. Doesn't matter if I'd rather watch TV. I'm going to do that. It's not about me. And now, let me also have the service of a child that says, well, here I am. This is my parent. Of course, I want to do what they want because I love them. So now that I have a baseline of awe, now I generate more and more love, and that will be the second wing that will allow everything to truly elevate. ואף יש בן שהוא גם כן עבד, הרי אי אפשר לבוא למדרגה זו בלי קדמת היראה הילאה, כידוע ליודעים.
And although one may find a son who is also a servant, it's impossible to attain to this degree without the prerequisite of the higher level of fear and awe, known as yira ilah, as is known to the initiated.
So you'll see we're gonna get into quite sophisticated conversations about the different levels of love and the different levels of reverence that are defined in Kabbalah, and meditations to generate each one. And here he says, until now we've been talking about lower level awe, so entry level awe, just base level awe, and that's where you're either a servant or you're a child. You're right now you're either this service or that service, right? They're separate services. It says now there is a higher level awe we haven't discussed yet, and that's where you're both a servant and a child, and the awe contains the love, or in fact the love contains the awe. So I can be at a level where I'm a child that also has that level of awe, but that is the higher level of awe we haven't discussed yet, and which we'll get to. Furthermore, so now we're going to go to a third level. He said, once we have this meditation that we've learned of in the morning, before I start my practice, filling my mind with an image and the divine concept that the Ein Sof fills the whole world, surrounds the world, is looking right at me and standing right in front of me, watching, am I serving correctly? And that generates awe. And then he says, well, what if, well, you don't feel it in your heart? That's okay, because you really do feel it deep in your heart. Every Jew does. And because you've impressed in your mind that that's the case, and so that serves just as well. That is divine service. And he says, now what if even in the mind? What if my mind is at a level, or even if I fill my mind with that meditation, I don't have that intellectual emotion, call it. I don't have that almost opinion in my mind, not opinion, but I don't feel that awe even in my mind, let alone my heart. What's the matter there? And what do I do then? He says, even that's not a problem. That still is complete service. And I'm going to preempt the translation here. Who's reading? We're at Doreen. So rather than the S word that is written, I want us to use the word humility, if you would, right? So let me read this one. Doreen, you'll take the next one. Furthermore, even in the case of an individual who even in their mind and thought feels no fear or humility. There's another word written there. I don't even say the word because I know it's such a triggering word these days. Yes, so vusha really is a sense of when I'm in front of someone so great that I'm gone. I'm vent, and I feel total humility in front of them. If I'm a physics student and suddenly I'm in the room with Albert Einstein, if I'm a violinist and suddenly Yitzhak Perlman's there. Incidentally, I did experience. I was at a funeral once when I started at Temple Israel, and one of the rabbis literally tapped me on the shoulder as I was tuning my guitar, because I was playing guitar for this memorial service. It wasn't a funeral. They tapped me on the shoulder and they said, "Look, it's Yitzhak Perlman," and I thought they were joking. And I turned around. This was a very cultured crowd. Apparently, one of the friends was. And there he was, Yitzhak Perlman, just sitting there, a guy in the congregation, for this memorial service. And here I am. I'm literally tuning my little Taylor guitar to play my basic cowboy chords in front of Yitzhak Perlman as I'm leading the service. How did I feel at that moment, right? I hadn't made a mistake. I hadn't done anything wrong. I was afraid. I wanted to just put my guitar away, right? Oh my God, in front of Yitzhak Perlman, I'm going to play a stringed instrument? Are you kidding me? Yitzhak Perlman? So... there's just at that moment you have so much humility. You just want to be, you come up and do it. I want to hear you play. So that's the idea. Even in my mind I don't feel that sense of awe or humility. And Dorian, let's do the next one. Mipnei pchitut erech nafsho mimkor chutz ba mimadregot tachtonot yud sfirot dasiya. On account. And if you can unmute for me, Doreen. Thank you.
On account of the limited grade of his soul, originating in the lower degrees of the 10 Sephirot of Asiya.
And thanks, Vicky, for the comment. First time you heard this? Yes, absolutely connected to Shavuot, and that is where we received the Torah. And that Sinai was the smallest mountain, and that's what made it the perfect mountain for receiving the Torah, as we just did on Shavuot. And so what's happening here? This is a person, and this is not uncommon, especially now in history when we learn it is really kind of the lowest level of souls that tend to be brought into the world due to the nature of the flow of history. That's another conversation. But some souls come from high up in the Sfirot. So you have the 10 Sfirot we've learned about. Some of them may come up even from Chesed or Gevura, or perhaps even rooted in the intellect of the Sfirot. You never know. But many souls are simply just not in the 10 Sfirot as they are in the highest world, Atzilus. They're from the 10 Sfirot of Asiya, the lowest spiritual world. And even then, they could be from the lowest one of the 10 Sfirot in Asiya. That's not uncommon. It's no shame. We're all who we are, right? And we all have our service. But that kind of soul will simply be much less sensitive to holiness and spirituality than a soul that comes from the world of Bria and the sphere of Chesed. That'll be a person, you say the word tzedakah, and they're suddenly dancing around. But somebody that comes from, the lowest sphere in Asiya, you say tzedakah and they think, oh, can I afford it, right? They're not necessarily quickly spiritually motivated. We have many different levels of souls that are here. So that might be the case with this person who, even though they've meditated, they don't feel it in their heart, and even their mind is not filled with this awe or this humility. Nevertheless, me'achar shemitkaven be'avodato kedei la'avod et hamelech, harei zo avodah gemura.
Nevertheless, since he is intent in his service to serve the king, this is unequivocally a complete service.
Right? Because they thought of the greatness of God, and that thought is what led to the mitzvah. Even if their intellect is not full of that humility and awe, the fact that thought motivated it, it still makes it a complete service. It still makes it a complete service. So as you're doing this meditation, I hope many of you are including it in your morning practice. Know you're going to have good days and bad days. And some days I'll have time and I'll be in a place where I can generate really palpable awe in my heart and then get the love flowing, and now I'm off to the races, do some mitzvahs. Some days it'll just be in my mind, and the meditation will remain in my mind and not really, my heart won't be responding naturally. And maybe some days I'll be so distracted, all I did was have the thought of it, and even my mind wasn't full of the way emotions exist in the intellect. But even still, because that thought is motivating everything I do that day, now I still have that baseline, and my love can function as a second wing, and I can elevate mitzvahs. So no matter what my own experience was, it still works. It's still there to serve God. And in a way, this speaks to the whole theme, which is that it's not about me. Because I know, if I'll speak for myself, if I get up and I have time and I meditate and I have a profound moment and I'm lost to time and space and I start to feel awe and love, look, it feels good and I feel pretty successful. Look, I'm a successful Tanya student, and here I am meditating, and now, I have real emotions. Watch me elevate these mitzvahs. There's the danger of a little bit more of me there. Whereas those days when I just do it because I know that's the right thing, I know that's the practice I took on, but I'm not feeling it, I'm not enjoying the emotions, I'm kind of stuck. In some ways, that day is less about me and is more about the Ein Sof and more about the other than the day when I'm really generating the emotions and I feel like I've done it. So it's not so simple when it comes to being other-centered. There's an advantage to even the days when you're off, so to speak. I'll be quiet because I'm just I'm off on my own here. Do you guys have any thoughts or comments? I want to keep track of where people are. We're good? We're good? Okay. Yes, Sharon? Oh, you're muted. I can't hear you.
What happened with Yitzhak Perlman? I can't wait. So you did your thing like you were supposed to?
He was very sweet. He did come up after, or maybe I came up to him, and he said, you sound like a certain cantor in New York that he likes, and he was very gracious. He didn't mention my guitar playing.
You see, it was okay.
It was absolutely okay. It's not yet. Yeah, the point I was making wasn't that it was going to be a disaster.
I wanted to actually ask on that paragraph where you retranslated the word that you didn't want to say, the S word.
Yeah.
Well, I had already crossed out no fear or S and written there. Would that be okay?
So vusha is not the same as yira. Yeah. So yira is the word for awe, and that is just that sense of something else. Someone else is great, and I have respect and awe and reverence for them. Vusha is really now where there's an element of embarrassment in it, right? So vusha is a type of awe. It's called sort of embarrassed awe is what it's called. Like there's a level of awe we'll learn about, and it's one of the highest levels of awe where I haven't done anything wrong, and it's not like I'm not a good person. I recognize the Ein Sof is so great that I'm embarrassed to even exist. And my mitzius, my identity, is gone because of it. And because my mitzius, my identity is gone, now I can be a vessel for holiness. So no, vusha is more like embarrassment than like awe.
So we can think of this as, to keep it straight, as a Yitzhak Perlman moment.
That's right. It's how a campfire guitarist like me feels playing in front of Yitzhak Perlman. It's vusha, right? Very much. Oi. Sorry, where am I? I lost my spot for fear. Oh, here. Yeah. And here he gives an actual halachic support to his statement that even if I'm just have the thought of awe, that is complete service. Why? Ki hayira ve'avoda nechshavot lishtei mitzvot b'minyan taryag ve'enan me'akvot zo etzo.
For fear and service are accounted as 2 commandments of the total of 613, and they do not exclude each other.
Right, so he's saying you're going to use your fear to serve God, your awe to serve God, but they're actually formally 2 separate commandments. It says, "Et Hashem Elokecha tira," you should have awe of God, and then it says, "and you should serve God." So those are 2 halves of a pasuk, and even if the fear is not even in your mind, that still doesn't limit that you're serving God with full service. Furthermore, v'hod shebemet mekayem gam mitzvat yira b'ma shemamshich hayira b'machashavto.
Furthermore, as a matter of fact, he not only fulfills the obligation of service, he also fulfills the commandment of fear God by introducing the fear into his thought, by thinking about it and seeking to arouse it.
Right? So it's like, I'm not even thinking about fear here. I'm just thinking about fear, if you know what I mean, right? So it's at that higher level where it's just, my mind's not there. I don't have in my mind this fear, or let alone my heart. But at least I think I should think the fear, right? So that's where I am. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to bring in this beautiful, very famous Gemara, where, let me tell the story a little before we go through it. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was actually on his deathbed, and his disciples wanted him to bless them. So here's this great sage blessing his closest disciples, who are also great sages themselves. It's a moment of holiness, and they're saying, please bless us. Like, wait for this blessing from this big tzaddik to all his students, and we're going to get this blessing. It's going to fill us with spiritual power to serve God even better. And they're waiting, and then he says to them, here's my blessing. May it be God's will that the awe of heaven is upon you, like the awe of another human being. Right? So here, I'm blessing you, my disciples. I'm the biggest tzaddik of the door. Right? You should. It's God's will that you should have that level of awe that you have of just any passing stranger. Right? You imagine their faces. They're like waiting for this blessing, and he says, like like the milkman, for instance. The way you have awe for the milkman. God's will is that you should have awe of heaven like you have for the milkman. And they say, just that level. Like they look at him and say, that's your blessing for us, that we should fear God like I fear a school teacher, like I fear a checkout person, like I fear a passing pedestrian, just someone with no relationship to me. How is that even a blessing? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said, Halavai, if only you had that level of fear of heaven. You have no idea how powerful that would be. You have no idea how much more you'd be serving God than now. And what's the idea? The idea is, if we have in our mind, if we just have the thought, God is watching me, and so how should I behave when anyone's watching me? How much would that change our behavior? How much would that change our behavior? Because we all know when we're sitting by ourselves alone and a thought occurs to us of something that is outside of how we'd like to behave, we consider it. Say, okay, just once or whatever it is, right? I give myself some slack when it comes to no one is watching me. Whereas, if I'm in public, or if the UPS person rang the doorbell and opened the door and is looking right into the house, and I'm sitting in the living room and they can see me, I have enough fear, I have enough awe of this person who has no power over me, who I have no relationship with, who's not necessarily greater than me or less than me, just another person. Right? I have enough awe of that person that I'm not going to do the wrong thing. I'm not going to do something that I shouldn't do. I'm embarrassed to do it in front of them, right? So he's saying a very profound thing. If we can just impress in our mind and have the thought, God is watching me, and at least I should have the presence of mind to not act out or do the wrong thing, just like if a random person happened to be watching me, now I'd always be at a higher functioning level. I'd always be serving God in a very different way. And let alone, it's not just any person, it's God, it's the infinite. So if I would do it for someone that's not necessarily great or not necessarily has power, all the more so for someone who is infinite and who has total power. Yes, Noreen?
It sounds like ego is involved there, because you care what people think of you or what God thinks of you. So it sounds like there's ego involved.
Well, that's the fear of a punishment thing, I think, because ultimately when ego is involved, it's because there's something in it for me, or there's something that I want to avoid, right? So yeah, you can go there. You could say, why do I not do something in front of the UPS person? Because I don't want to ruin my reputation. I don't want to ruin it's going to hurt my ego. And so yeah, if it's still an ego thing, that's like fear of punishment. That's fear of negative repercussion. But there's also just propriety, right? There's also just like, I care enough about any passing person, and I have respect, that's a sentient being, that I'm just not going to do something wrong in front of them because they're watching me, right? So it's that one we're talking about, that I have enough fear just of the other person being aware of what I'm doing, that it's going to keep me in a better place. So I hear what you're saying, and then that I would put that in the category of fear of punishment as opposed to fear of sin. But thank you. I think it's the first. So it's our second question. We'll have more of a conversation now, which I always appreciate. Any comments online? I saw Vicky's. Oh, is it 11:29? All right, let's stop here and do a little bit of our meditation to make sure we are getting our wings in order, so to speak. So if you're with us for the first time, we'll take just a few minutes to do what's called the short long path. That is our meditation system. We're going to clear our mind as one does in Eastern meditation. But then we're going to not leave the mind empty, but introduce this divine concept of having awe of the Ein Sof. Let's find yourself in a relaxed position. The position is really not so important in Jewish meditation. Sitting, lying, whatever's good. What is important is I want my breath to flow properly, so let's deepen our breath. You want to scan your body and make sure there's no... my shoulders might be a little tense. Let's let them fall heavy towards the earth. If my neck is a little crinkled from watching a screen, let's lengthen it. Give it lots of space. Eyeballs smooth and falling down towards the floor. Cheeks smooth, forehead smooth. As I breathe in, we're going to Take 4 counts for each stage of the natural breath cycle. 4 in, for keeping the breath held in, 4 releasing the breath out, and then 4 keeping the breath out. Let's start together and breathing in. 2, 3, 4. Stay inflated. 3, 4. Breathing back out. 2, 3, 4. And stay empty. 2, 3. Repeating, breathing in. 2, 3, 4. Nice and full. 2, 3, 4. Release the breath out. 2, 3, 4. Nice and empty. Now let's breathe through the nostrils if you're comfortable with mouth closed. In. 2, 3, 4. Stay there. Out through the nose. 2, 3, 4. And stay there. Continue that cycle on your own. If you can, bring your belly into it. So breathing in, your belly swells out. Keep nice and round as you stay inflated. And then breathing out, the belly pulls up to the diaphragm. Now let's open up our wisdom gateway. That is the space between the end of the in-breath and the beginning of the out-breath. That space is our wisdom gateway to allow the divine concept to enter from the highest point into consciousness. Open it up quite naturally. And try and stay there, as it were, for the rest of the breathing cycle. And with that Chokhmah gateway open, let's introduce this divine concept, this meditation, into our wisdom gateway. There's an infinite light that fills the entire creation, that surrounds creation from outside. That is leaving aside the higher worlds, paying direct attention to me, each of us, and needing us to take on the posture of servants, to do whatever the divine asks of us that will come our way during this day, whatever the world needs, whatever our friends need, whatever the community needs. God is paying direct attention, and we should be working for God, serving God, as if we were standing directly in front of God, who is watching us, right inside our minds and our hearts. As you breathe, let that divine concept, that meditation, fill the wisdom gateway. Just let details emerge and fill your mind, and flow into every corner of our Bina consciousness, our cognitive consciousness. That's our meditation. Notice anything you're feeling as you fill your mind with this meditation. That is the wing of reverence and awe that we will use to elevate all our mitzvahs, and to make sure our love for God is filled with reverence as well. Very good. Once you're in this posture, to remain here for 5, 10, 20 minutes. So feel free to pause this class and remain in the meditation if you're practicing on your own at the moment. If not, we're out of time, so let's wiggle our fingers and toes. Open your eyes and welcome back. Thank you, Edward. Blessings to you too. Thanks for everyone who's been with us on Facebook. This is User's Guide for the Soul, so if you joined us halfway through, feel free to join us in the Zoom live. Just email Maya at temple-israel.org, and we'd love to have you. If not, signing off Facebook now. We will see you next time.